Welcome back to the Gridiron, guys, and today we're going to be going over another player profile, and that player profile will be for David Johnson. David Johnson is one of my favorite mid-round sleepers. He is one of the few running backs in the middle rounds that I have a ton of faith in to, I guess you could say, bounce back, but he didn't play bad last year. That's a common misconception. He got injured, and it says he played 13 games and only had 100 points. But those last, 7 games that he played, he did not get the ball. Arizona had already committed to Kenyon Drake. And I just love David Johnson and this Texans team, and I think he's going to have a great season. So let's get right into it. I feel that David Johnson is commonly labeled injury prone. And yes, he had one big injury where he missed 15 games in a year. And he did miss 3 games last year, he's banged up. But I believe in his 5 seasons he's played, 3 of them were full 16-game seasons. That's very reassuring. He's only 28 years old. I feel like we label him as this really old back who's a veteran who just doesn't have much left in the tank. But he has not had that big of a toll on him. He's only 28. He did not have that huge of a college workload. He has not gotten a lot of work this year, and the year he got injured, so he really has 3 years of full treads under him. This guy is a guy who should be in his prime. He did look a bit slower than I would say when he was his 2016 dominant self last year, but he's a guy who doesn't rely on his speed. He's very agile, has decent speed, and great body control for a bigger back. He won't run you over, but he can break tackles he'll break all the arm tackles, bad tackles in the world. He makes defenders look silly. He's a great receiving back. And I love the fit in Houston. So let's get into that fit in Houston. Last year, Carlos Hyde finished as the RB23. Best season of Carlos Hyde's career as a Texan. He had 255 total touches, 10 of those were receptions, and he ran for around 1,000 yards, a little bit over 1,000 yards. David Johnson is going to be seeing a huge volume. He is double the player that Carlos Hyde is, and he's going to be seeing 250-plus touches in a high-scoring offense. He's going to be playing with one of the best QBs in the league, in Deshaun Watson. And their wide receiver core is very underrated. I think they have a lot of depth there. There's a lot of guys who can play well. Even if they get injured, they're going to play well when they're out there, and they have a lot of depth. They have Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Kiki Kuti, Kenny Stills, Randall Cobb, and a decent tight end in Darren Fells. That's a great amount of options that will help open up things for David Johnson. One stat that I found when I'm going through some statistics was, if you take David Johnson's average touches and average them out to Carlos Hyde, so we make David Johnson's touches for last year, and we average out his statistics to the 255 touches that he would have received if he had Carlos Hyde's workload, he would have scored 205 points last year and finished as the RB9 if he got the amount of touches that Carlos Hyde did, and you average his stats to reflect that. RB9. That's a decently high RB1. Currently being drafted as a low-end to mid-tier value RB2. He was on a per-touch basis of RB9 last year, and this guy is getting bust hype I've seen everywhere. Bust. It's ridiculous. And not only is he a great running back, but he is a great receiver. Say his rushing efficiency is down as it was last year. I don't think he fit Arizona's scheme. More of a speed scheme. That's why Kenyon Drake fit a lot better. But he has elite receiving skills. In 2016, he caught 80 passes for 879 yards. Last year, Arizona would line him at receiver. He'd run out routes against safeties and beat them consistently. I watched him his highlights in some of his games from 2019, and he ran a seam route right past the safety for 40-yard touchdown, caught it in the end zone. He's a terrific receiver, and I think Bill O'Brien will be able to use him in a very versatile way in Houston. He can line out in the slot and be a mismatch nightmare for a linebacker, or he can catch bubble screens out of the backfield. He has extremely good hands and is a talented receiver. I know they have Duke Johnson, but he could see some third down work, and he likely will because he is far better with the ball in his hands than Duke Johnson is. And, last year, another stat that really stood out to me was last year David Johnson had 12-plus touches when he actually was getting the ball, being the starter for Kenyon Drake, in 6 games, the first 6 games of the year. and he scored 93.3 points in those 6 games. And I thought back. Before I saw this, I thought, oh, David Johnson never played well last year. He didn't start well. And this is what I had in my mind. I think a lot of us had the same thought because we were so bittersweet in that ending. But he scored 93.3 points in those first 6 games to Cardinal, which was 15.5 a game. Put that for a full 16-game season. That's 249.3 points in half-point PPR, finishing as the RB5. Only trailing Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones, Christian McCaffrey, and Derrick Henry. If he stayed healthy last year and no Kenyon Drake was added because David Johnson was on the field, he would have been the RB5 for the year. The only risk that David Johnson presents is getting injured, and he's been injured in 2 of his 5 fantasy seasons, and that means he's been injured in 40% of the time he's played. If you're telling me there's a 60% chance he plays a full 16 games next year, that's a 60% chance he finishes an RB1. I am certain if David Johnson is on the field for a full 16 games, he will finish as an RB1. He will get the exact same workload on the ground that Carlos Hyde got, 1,000 yards rushing, around 6 touchdowns, and he will likely command 60 targets, maybe 65 targets, even 70, depending how well Duke Johnson plays in the passing game. And that will elevate him from RB23, which is his floor, I think, if he's healthy, which was Carlos Hyde's floor, to a RB1 because he is a terrific pass catcher. I mean, we saw his per-game efficiency last year. His rushing yards per carry may have been mediocre at best, but he put up fantasy stats. It's not always about talent in fantasy football. I heard a stat the other day saying, of the 14 top backs, 13 of them had the highest opportunity for their position. Oftentimes in fantasy football, especially for running backs, it's all about the opportunity. A guy who gets 350 touches and runs for a mediocre yards per carry will be a far better fantasy option than a player who gets 150 touches in a committee and runs for an elite yards per carry number. I mean, that's an example of Raheem Mostert, who ran for a great yards per carry, who wasn't that great in fantasy last year. He was in a few weeks, but he wasn't that great because he didn't get the ball a lot, compared to a guy like Melvin Gordon back in the day, who was running for 3.8, 3.9 yards a carry and getting a ton of work in the passing game, scoring a ton of rushing touchdowns and finishing as a top 10 fantasy running back. Opportunity is greater than talent and efficiency, and I think David Johnson is in the perfect place to succeed as long as he can stay on the field, and I think his injuries are being blown out of proportion. This is a 28-year-old player only playing 5 seasons and only having 2 injured seasons to 3 full seasons played. He is at a great value, and if this is a guy you can be getting as an RB2, I'm happy. If he is your third running back, your running backs are set. I mean, if he's in your flex, that's a dominant flex play. I'd take him over most receivers for a flex play. I mean, his ADP is great. I don't expect it to rise, maybe even decline as some of the younger, hotter rookies rise up the rankings as they usually do come August. David Johnson is just a guy that I love for this fantasy season and a guy I will be targeting in every single one of my leagues. I want him on every single roster. And that concludes my analysis on David Johnson. I think he's a great player for fantasy this year. And stay tuned. I'm going to be putting up some more player profiles on league-winning running backs that you can get in these middle rounds that will really help you out with an undervalued and an overvalued running back videos coming out soon. So make sure to stay tuned for that and turn on the bell. Click on the bell down below and get some post notifications for YouTube so you get those videos right when they upload. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, as always, at our profile, Gridiron _guys_YT, all lowercase. And stay tuned for those running back videos in the near future.